So our next speaker is Dr. Lise Martin, and she works with the French Research Institute for Health and Medical Research in Paris. So we welcome her, and she's going to present on the cascade of care for the French Caribbean.
Thank you very much for this invitation to talk about the cascade of care in the French Caribbean. So I try to stick so the French Caribbean, there are actually 3 departments in the French Caribbean. They are Guyane, which is located north of Brazil, never mind, and 2 islands, Guadeloupe and Martinique, with population size around 250,000 inhabitants, and Guyane, which has a smaller population size of around 140,000 inhabitants. So I'm going to present you first the data sources and the methods that we use to produce these estimates. Then I will briefly present you an overview of the epidemiological situation in France, with estimates of the cascade of care, but also incidence and the time in between stages of the care continuum. And I will then present you the focus on the French Caribbean. So to estimate HIV prevalence and the cascade of care, we need to produce estimates on 3 subpopulations of the HIV-infected population: the undiagnosed population, the diagnosed population which is not yet linked to care, and then the population which is in care. And so to estimate these 3 population size, we will use 3 types of data. So first, for the undiagnosed population size, we are using a back calculation model, which is a statistical method that uses some data on new HIV diagnosis to estimate both the incidence and the time between the infection and the diagnosis. And with these 2 estimates, we can deduce the number of people who live with undiagnosed HIV. So that's the first part. For the second part, the diagnosed, which are not in care, we use this estimate of the HIV undiagnosed population, together with some data on coming from a HIV patient cohort in France, which is a very large prospective cohort. And for the population which is in care, we use the same HIV patient cohort and also data from the health insurance scheme. So with this data, we estimated that around 160,000 persons were living with HIV in France in 2016. Among them, 86% were diagnosed, 82% were on treatment, and 75% were virally suppressed. And if we compare these numbers to the UNAIDS target 1990, we can see that we are very close from this target, just a bit below for the first step and a bit above for the 2 other steps. So it's nice, it's the part of the story that we can be happy about, but then if we look at the incidence in France, then the situation is less nice. So in this figure, you can see the incidence and the observed number of new diagnoses, which are the gray bar, and the estimated number of infections, which is the black circle with the black line giving the confidence interval. Over 2004 and 2016, what we can see on this figure is that the incidence didn't decrease over the last years in France. It remains steady and stays around 5,800 new infections in 2016, corresponding to an incidence rate of 1.5 new infections per 10,000 inhabitants. So actually, the incidence is not exploding, but it's not decreasing either at all. So even though we have almost met the target, the 1990 target, we can see that there is still a lot of room for improvement. Sorry. To see where there can be room for improvement in this cascade, it's also nice to see the cascade from differently, and instead of looking at the number of people in each stage, to look at the time that they spend in each stage. So here on this figure you can see the median times in between stages of the HIV care continuum in France over 2014 to 2016. So the first grey rectangle gives the length of this rectangle gives the length of the interval between infection and diagnosis. Then the very thin black rectangle gives the time between the diagnosis and care entry. Then the light grayish dashed interval is between the care entry and the ART initiation, and the last one, the dark gray dashed, is the time between ART initiation and viral suppression. So what's clear from this figure is that it's the time between infection and diagnosis that remains very long in France. So it was estimated at 2.9 years, whereas for the other steps it's just a few months, between less than a month to a bit less than 4 months in median. So what we can say from this is that these high levels of care engagement that we have seen in the HIV cascade of care can hide late HIV diagnosis and ART initiation. And that's why in the focus about HIV in the French Caribbean, I will more focus about this type of cascade with the time and also on the incidence and some estimate of the undiagnosed population. So the French Caribbean, here are the same plot for the incidence and the new diagnosis in the 3 French Caribbean, so Guyane, Guadeloupe, Martinique. We can see that over the last years, the incidence in Guadeloupe and Martinique remains steady. The estimates are a bit more uncertain for Guyane. We see a kind of wave which might be a bit less well estimated. But anyway, the estimate that we get from this is that there were 20 new infections per 10,000 new inhabitants in 2016 in Guyane, which is 13-fold the national rate. 4.8 new infections per 10,001 in Guadeloupe, which is more than 3-fold the national rate, and 2.8 per 10,000 in Martinique, which is 2-fold the national rate. So very high incidence rate in this French department. And if we look at these estimates estimated by sex, we can see that for men in Guadeloupe and Martinique, the rates are higher than for women. It's a bit the same in Guyane, but since the incidence seems to be a bit less well estimated, I wouldn't say that it's significant. And if we look at this, this cascade of care in terms of time between the stages, so on the top row you have the time between the stages for Martinique, and the middle row is for Guadeloupe, and the lower row is for Guyane, and it's for the global population in each department. So we can see the same than for France, namely that after diagnosis, all the stages the lengths of the stages are very short, whereas the length of the time between infection and diagnosis is very long, so 2.9 years for Martinique, 3.7 for Guadeloupe, 3.4 for Guyane. And this estimate by sex shows that for men in Guadeloupe and Guyane, we have longer time between infection and diagnosis, and whereas in Martinique we have shorter time between infection and diagnosis than for women. And this can be explained by the fact that we have a higher proportion of MSM among newly diagnosed men in Martinique compared to Guadeloupe and Guyane, and we know that the men who have sex with men tend to have a higher testing frequency than heterosexuals. So to improve this time cascade, we need to diagnose the undiagnosed infection, and we estimated that there were around 300 undiagnosed infections in Martinique in 2016, a bit less than 600 in Guadeloupe, and a bit more than 1,000 in Guyane. This estimate by sex shows that this undiagnosed infection concerns 74%, were at 74% in men in Martinique and Guadeloupe, and that the sex ratio in Guyane was more even. 40% of this undiagnosed infection occurred in women, whereas 60% occurred in men. And relative to the population size in each department and sex, we can see that the rates are, the undiagnosed prevalence rates are again very high for this department. So 11.7 undiagnosed infection per 10,000 inhabitants in Martinique, which is twofold the national rate. 21.4 in Guadeloupe, which is threefold the national rate, and 73.7 in Guyane, which is 13-fold the national rate. And also, we can see higher undiagnosed prevalence rates for men than for women in Martinique and Guadeloupe. So, as I told you a bit before, that the shorter time between infection and diagnosis among men in Martinique could be explained by the fact that there were more men who have sex with men in the new diagnosis. I mean, this is also interesting to look into the diagnosis to see more precisely what are the transmission groups in the diagnosis, because we cannot have estimates for all the transmission groups because sometimes it's not enough data. So in the diagnosis in Martinique, we see three main exposure groups, which are France-born men who have sex with men, and France-born heterosexual men and women. In Guadeloupe, there are still a lot of France-born MSN. It's 23% of the new diagnosis, a bit less than in Martinique. But the other main groups are born heterosexual women and men. And in Guyane, there are much less men who have sex with men in the new diagnosis, but it's mostly born heterosexual women and men that account for the new diagnosis. 66% of the new diagnoses are for the born heterosexuals. So in conclusion, these estimates show that there is a very active epidemic in all the French Caribbean. The incidence rates in 2016 are very high, 13-fold the national rate for Guyane, 3-fold for Guadeloupe, and almost twice for Martinique. And it's the same ratio for the undiagnosed prevalence rate. The time between infection and diagnosis remain long, more than 2.9 years, whereas the other stages are much shorter, and it's especially long for men. And looking at the diagnosis, we can see that the population differ between departments. We have more MSM and French-born heterosexuals in Martinique, MSM and born heterosexuals in Guadeloupe, and born heterosexual in Guyane. And as a more general conclusion, we can see that this conclusion highlights that it's essential to adapt, design, implement, and evaluate tailored HIV interventions in each setting. Thank you for your attention.
Impressed with the detailed nature of your data. I wish we could do as well as you have done. The floor is open, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, President. I'm from the Netherlands. 3 years between diagnosis and going into care. Do you know what factors are related to that? Do they come because they have complaints then when they go into real
They
care?
don't test
What
enough.
factors?
That's because the testing frequency the people is too low. I mean, or at least of the people who should test more often is too low. So So for MSM, for instance, at the national level, the time is shorter. It's around 2 years, and whereas it's more 4 years for the hetero, and a bit more than 4 years for the heterosexual men. So it depends on the testing frequency of the group, of the people.
So you don't know why it's a delay that they go into care.
There is to go into care.
Yeah, why? It's 3 years, but what are the reasons?
It's between the infection and the diagnosis, not to enter the care.
Not between diagnosis and going on. Going
Well,
care.
thereafter it's very short. It's less than a month to enter care. It's like 2 months to start treatment, and it's like nowadays it's 4 months to be very suppressed. So these time intervals are very short. I guess no, it's quite short.
Hi, I'm Sigrid from Amsterdam. I think you have quite a few of our patients in Guyana. But how did you estimate the duration for the infection to diagnosis? I was wondering how you...
It's a method, it's a statistical model which is called back calculation. So it uses the annual number of new HIV diagnoses, split by, stratified by clinical stage. So either primary infection or AIDS at diagnosis, or neither AIDS nor primary infection. And so the model derives the annual incidence and the distribution of time between this infection each year and the diagnosis each year to match the diagnosis stratified by clinical stage, making a few assumptions for the primary infection and for the AIDS. So for the primary infection, it's assumed that it's between 0 and 6 months, and for the AIDS, it's a logistic with a median of 10 years, and in between it adjusts.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I was wondering whether you've been able to look at 5 years prior to those present data to see if you have the same trend or if the time period between HIV diagnosis and getting into care was longer.
It's not longer. It didn't change much. So it's quite stable. What has changed a bit is the time to from entering care to starting treatment, but because of the guidelines which have changed. So that has changed a bit over time. It has reduced, but for the time between infection and diagnosis, actually, unfortunately, it's very stable.
It's also surprising that with such high percentage of people in treatment and a high viral suppression that you are not having an impact on transmission, apparently.
Well, yes, it's because the cascade of care is a very static description. You know, I mean, the 86% of the person living with HIV are diagnosed, but it means that these 14% which are undiagnosed, it's actually it's 28,000 people. It's not nothing. So it's this part which is very active, and that doesn't allow the incidence to decrease.
Yeah, one last comment. Fantastic data. One caution is that because you back calculated based on the CD4 count and the clinical stage, it also means that most of the people that were diagnosed are actually diagnosed in a short period of time, so they are actually healthier and their immune status are better. Within 3 years of infection, CD4 counts are still high and people are in a better shape to get treatment. So it seems that whatever is being done in terms of the messages for testing are good. 3 years is not bad compared to many other places where people present in very late stages of HIV infection, and so 3 years means really asymptomatic and with good CD4 counts, presumably.
Okay, thank you so much, Liz, for that presentation.